For your ears only for the week of September 7th and another 9/11 anniversary, I'm David Alpern with Warren Levinson of Associated Press and the only story that really mattered for our September 16th, 2001 Newsweek On Air show, America Attacked.
I was on the street and everyone started running and screaming away from the World Trade Towers. And then the second one, I just heard a big explosion. It moved everything and it blew our windows out.
It was more than chaotic. People were slamming into each other trying to grab hold of something to get out of the building. People did not know which way to run.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
No words can do real justice to the horror and pain unleashed by 4 teams of suicide plane hijackers last week, virtually atomizing New York's towering World Trade Center, both an icon and a functioning heart of Western capitalism, and smashing into the headquarters of American military might. Nearly 5,000 people were presumed dead, and the nation left behind seemed likely to be changed forever by the tragic loss, by new waves of security restraints and economic costs, and by a sudden painful realization of vulnerability.
But unity and heroism also emerged from the passengers who fought the captors on one hijacked plane and downed it before it reached another presumed target in Washington, to rescue workers who were themselves crushed by the falling Trade Center towers, to the endless streams of volunteers at New York's Ground Zero, blood donors coast to coast, and all those who set out flags and candles and prayed.
For more on the worst attack ever on American soil and the nation's response, we start with Newsweek Assistant Managing Editor Evan Thomas and Chief Political Correspondent Howard Fineman. But first, a few of your views in a new Newsweek poll. 71% favor attacking terrorist bases and nations that harbor them, even with a high likelihood of civilian casualties. 54% favor attacking suspected terrorists like Osama bin Laden, even if we're not sure they're responsible for last week's acts. And even though less than half think such steps would really be very effective in preventing future attacks, indeed 43% say such attacks on the U.S. are very likely. Another 39% say somewhat. President Bush's job approval rating has jumped to 82%, though, almost the same as for FDR after Pearl Harbor.
Now to Evan Thomas. Evan, what do we know about what officials fear about the possibility that there could be other cells like this one out there?
Well, they fear it. One senior intelligence official told us that there could be 50 other cells out there. Another talked in terms of dozens, but they have a real fear that there's more to come.
In retrospect, court papers show a lot of terror suspects taking flight training here, but you say the new targets may be far removed from air travel.
Well, I mean, this may be fighting the last war. I mean, they found a way to use our technology against us through using airliners as bombs, basically. But we're going to look for other means. We know they're trying to buy uranium, enriched uranium, to build a nuclear weapon or buy a nuclear weapon. I'm sure they're looking for other weapons of mass destruction. So we have terrible things to look forward to, I'm afraid.
69% of the Newsweek poll say the FBI and CIA deserve at least some blame for last week's attack. Only 28% have a very favorable opinion of the CIA, only 37% for the FBI. What kind of official criticism or shakeup might we expect?
There's going to be a blame game, absolutely. In fact, Newsweek has learned that at the CIA, when they looked at the list of the 19 dead hijackers, they saw 3 names that were familiar, and in fact had warned the INS and the FBI in late August to be watching for a couple of them. The FBI couldn't find them. At least one of them was connected to the bombing of the USS Cole in October of 2000. So there's going to be great recrimination over just that, over not the inability to find 2 or 3 of these guys who are out there and known to be dangerous.
Newsweek's Evan Thomas. Next up, Howard Fineman. Howard, how do we judge Bush's handling of the crisis so far?
Well, the American people judge it very favorably, as you said in the poll, and I think even people in Washington who might have otherwise been critical of him toward the beginning of the week, when he was literally on the run that first day for security reasons, have had nothing but praise for him ever since.
You got the insight into a special meeting he had with legislators?
He had a meeting on Thursday, day 3 of the New World, with 4 senators, the 2 from New York and the 2 from Virginia, and they weren't expecting much. The New Yorkers were there to plead their case for $20 billion in aid, which they didn't think they would get the president's support for, at least all that money initially. The Virginians were there because they wanted some inside dope on what was going to happen militarily and take the measure of their commander-in-chief. since Virginia is the home of the military, really, in America, plus the Pentagon. But all four of them got more than they bargained for. Instead of just a short meeting, Bush lingered with him for more than a half hour. It was very impressive to all four of them, very warm and fraternal with Hillary Rodham Clinton, of all people, and Chuck Schumer, two Democrats from a liberal state. He immediately agreed to back the $20 billion, which surprised them, and which the Congress passed unanimously the next day.
Up to $40 billion.
Up to $40 billion. And for the Virginians, there was a lot of warlike talk, including this priceless quote from the president. He said that when I take action, quote, I'm not going to fire a $2 million missile at a $10 empty tent and hit a camel in the butt. It's going to be decisive. Now, that's not Winston Churchill, guys, but that's George Bush talking, and it's something the American people very much want to hear.
2 weeks ago, we were talking a tremendous amount about all of the fighting over the Social Security lockbox, a debate that seems to have evaporated. Do the debates over military spending evaporate as well?
I think for now, I don't think George Bush is going to push his missile defense shield right this minute. There are much more immediate concerns having to do with troop deployments and hardening of the infrastructure of the country. Homeland defense has become the new buzz phrase here in Washington. You know, George Bush campaigned on and came to Washington promising to set a new tone here. Sadly, it took an unspeakable tragedy to change things here, but they changed utterly overnight. You know, mortal enemies literally embracing each other in tears here. All these old disputes that seem trivial now. The whole age of innuendo and gossip and scandal was blown away. And if there's anything good that came of the horrible tragedy of this week politically, it's that. And it's, of course, up to President Bush to build on the unity that's now behind him. For a lot of complex decisions he's got to make now in terms of diplomacy, military affairs, and domestic affairs here, guys, because there's going to come a time when we're going to have to begin choosing between freedom and security, and those are the toughest decisions for a democracy to make.
Is there a new sense of vulnerability in Washington, as we have to say there is here in New York?
No question, David. People look up at the skies when they see an airplane fly by in the way they hadn't just a few days ago. Things are changed here forever. This was supposed to be a cushy and invulnerable place. It'll never be that again.
Howard Fineman is Newsweek's chief political correspondent. He's in Washington, as is assistant managing editor Evan Thomas.
Here are some quotes from the tragedy. I just cried was Won Young Kim, the Columbia University scientist in charge of monitoring earthquakes in North America, as his seismographs registered the World Trade Center buildings collapsed while he watched on TV.
Here's another one. I don't think I'm going to get out. You've been a really good friend. That was a final email from a Trade Center employee.
Where did it go? Oh, Lord, where did it go? Was an elderly woman in Lower Manhattan as smoke cleared, revealing empty space where towers had stood.
From our September 16, 2001 Newsweek On Air broadcast, now a quote from last week's news. We're better off with a president who doesn't have a good strategy and knows he doesn't than with a president who has a bad strategy but thinks he has a good one. That was conservative talking head Newt Gingrich defending President Obama against GOP criticism he's not taken stronger action against the brutal Islamic State. Later, the U.S. and allies, including Britain and France, agreed on an international military coalition to fight the growing radical threat. Also last week, while a ceasefire was negotiated for the embattled pro-Moscow region of Ukraine, NATO leaders authorized a rapid response force and preset bases to deter Moscow moves on member nations, which do not include Ukraine. Next, security and psychology for your ears only.